Chapter 52. The Lie of the Enemy Refuted. A View of the Women in Council over Female Suffrage. The Sisters Know Their Political Power. It was charged, however, by the anti-Mormons, that woman's suffrage in Utah was only designed to further enslave the Mormon women, that they took no part in its passage, and have had no soul in its exercise. Nearly the reverse of this is the case, as the records, to follow, will show. In the expositions of the Mormon religion, priesthood and genius, which have been given, it has been seen that the women are, equally with their prophets and apostles, the founders of their church and the pillars of its institutions, the difference being only that the man is first in the order, and the woman is his helpmate, or, more perfectly expressed, they twain are one, in the broadest and most exalted sense. Hence, no sooner was suffrage granted to the Mormon women, than they exercised it as a part of their religion, or as the performance of woman's life duties, marked out for her in the economy of divine providence. In this apostolic spirit, they took up the grant of political power. Hence, also, in accordance with the fundamental Mormon view of an essential partnership existing between the man and the woman, in all things, both in this world and in the world to come, there grew up, as we have seen, in the days of Joseph the prophet, female organizations, set apart and blessed for woman's ministry in this life, to be extended into the eternities. True, these women's organizations have been known by the name of relief societies, but their sphere extends to every department of woman's mission, and they may be viewed as female suffrage societies in a female suffrage movement, or society mates of any masculine movement which might arise to shape or control human affairs, religious, social or political. It was this society that, as by the lifting of the finger, in a moment aroused 50,000 women in Utah, simultaneously to hold their indignation mass meetings throughout the territory against the Cullum Bill. At that very moment the female suffrage bill was passed by their legislature, so that the exercise of their vote at the subsequent election was a direct expression of their will upon the most vital of all social questions, the marriage question. Here are the minutes of a general meeting of this great female relief society, held in Salt Lake City, February 19, 1870, just 7 days after the passage of their bill, and 2 days before the exercise of the female vote at the election. Minutes. Most of the wards of the city were represented. Miss E. R. Snow was elected president, and Mrs. L. D. Alder secretary. Meeting opened with singing, prayer by Mrs. Harriet Cook Young. Miss Eliza R. Snow arose and said, to encourage the sisters in good works, she would read an account of our indignation meeting, as it appeared in the Sacramento Union, which account she thought a very fair one. She also stated that an expression of gratitude was due acting Governor Mann, for signing the document granting women's suffrage in Utah, for we could not have had the right without his sanction, and said that Wyoming had passed a bill of this kind over its governor's head, but we could not have done this. The following names were unanimously selected to be a committee for said purpose: Eliza R. Snow, Bathsheba W. Smith, Sarah M. Kimball, M. T. Smoot, H. C. Young, N. D. Young, Phoebe Woodruff, M. I. Horn, M. N. Hyde, Eliza Cannon, Rachel Grant, Amanda Smith. Mrs. Sarah M. Kimball said she had waited patiently a long time, and now that we were granted the right of suffrage, she would openly declare herself a woman's rights woman, and called upon those who would do so to back her up, whereupon many manifested their approval. She said her experience in life had been different from that of many. She had moved in all grades of society, had been both rich and poor, had always seen much good and intelligence in woman. The interests of man and woman cannot be separated, for the man is not without the woman nor the woman without the man in the Lord. She spoke of the foolish custom which deprived the mother of having control over her sons at a certain age, said she saw the foreshadowing of a brighter day in this respect in the future. She said she had entertained ideas that appeared wild, which she thought would yet be considered woman's rights, spoke of the remarks made by Brother Rockwood, lately, that women would have as much prejudice to overcome, in occupying certain positions, as men would in granting them, and concluded by declaring that woman was the helpmate of man in every department of life. Mrs. Phoebe Woodruff said she was pleased with the reform, and was heart and hand with her sisters. She was thankful for the privilege that had been granted to women, but thought we must act in wisdom and not go too fast. She had looked for this day for years. God has opened the way for us. We have borne in patience, but the yoke on woman is partly removed. Now that God has moved upon our brethren to grant us the right of female suffrage, let us lay it by, and wait till the time comes to use it, and not run headlong and abuse the privilege. Great and blessed things are ahead. All is right and will come out right, and woman will receive her reward in blessing and honor. May God grant us strength to do right in His sight. Mrs. Bathsheba W. Smith said she felt pleased to be engaged in the great work before them, and was heart and hand with her sisters. She never felt better in her life, yet never felt more her own weakness, in view of the greater responsibilities which now rested upon them, nor ever felt so much the necessity of wisdom and light, but she was determined to do her best. She believed that woman was coming up in the world. She encouraged her sisters with the faith that there was nothing required of them in the duties of life that they could not perform. Mrs. Prescindia Kimball said, "I feel comforted and blessed this day. I am glad to be numbered in moving forward in this reform, feel to exercise double diligence and try to accomplish what is required at our hands. We must all put our shoulder to the wheel and go ahead. I am glad to see our daughters elevated with man, and the time come when our votes will assist our leaders, and redeem ourselves. Let us be humble, and triumph will be ours. The day is approaching when woman shall be redeemed from the curse placed upon Eve, and I have often thought that our daughters who are in polygamy will be the first redeemed. Then let us keep the commandments and attain to a fullness, and always bear in mind that our children born in the priesthood will be saviors on Mount Zion." Mrs. Zena D. Young said she was glad to look upon such an assemblage of bright and happy faces, and was gratified to be numbered with the spirits who had taken tabernacles in this dispensation, and to know that we are associated with kings and priests of God, thought we do not realize our privileges. Be meek and humble and do not move one step aside, but gain power over ourselves. Angels will visit the earth, but are we, as handmaids of the Lord, prepared to meet them? We live in the day that has been looked down upon with great anxiety since the morn of creation. Mrs. M. T. Smoot said, "We are engaged in a great work, and the principles that we have embraced are life and salvation unto us. Many principles are advanced on which we are slow to act. There are many more to be advanced. Woman's rights have been spoken of. I have never had any desire for more rights than I have. I have considered politics aside from the sphere of woman, but, as things progress, I feel it is right that we should vote, though the path may be fraught with difficulty." Mrs. Wilmarth East said she would bear testimony to what had been said. She had found by experience that obedience is better than sacrifice. "I desire to be on the safe side and sustain those above us, but I cannot agree with Sister Smoot in regard to woman's rights. I have never felt that woman had her privileges. I always wanted a voice in the politics of the nation, as well as to rear a family. I was much impressed when I read the poem composed by Mrs. Emily Woodmans, Who Cares to Win a Woman's Thought? There is a bright day coming, but we need more wisdom and humility than ever before. My sisters, I am glad to be associated with you, those who have borne the heat and burden of the day, and ask God to pour blessings on your head." Eliza R. Snow, in closing, observed that there was a business item she wished to lay before the meeting, and suggested that Sister Bathsheba W. Smith be appointed on a mission to preach retrenchment all through the South, and woman's rights, if she wished. The suggestion was acted upon, and the meeting adjourned with singing, "Redeemer of Israel," and benediction by Mrs. M. N. Hyde. Let the reader be further told that, though this was a sort of a convention of the Great Relief Society of Utah, which can move 50,000 women in a moment, it was not a woman's suffrage meeting. It was a gathering of the sisters for consideration of the retrenchment of the table, and general domestic economy, the retrenchment societies having been just inaugurated under the leadership of Sister Horn. But, it will be seen that the meeting was changed to a woman's feast of anticipations, and table retrenchment met scarcely an incidental reference that day, for the spirit of woman's future rested upon the sisters, spoke with its still, small voice, and pointed to the bright looming star of woman's destiny. That these women will move wisely, and in the fear of God, is very evident, nor will they use the tremendous power which they are destined to hold to break up their church and destroy their faith in the revelation of the new and everlasting covenant, given through the prophet Joseph Smith. Indeed, they will yet send their testimony through the world, with 10,000 voices, confirmed by the potency of the woman's vote, and flood the nation with their light. Congress need not fear to trust the woman's supreme question into the safekeeping of 50,000 God-fearing, self-sacrificing, reverent women. In vain will the anti-Mormons and pretentious regenerators look for these women to become revolutionary or impious. What they do will be done in the name and fear of the Lord, yet, mark the prophecy of one of their leaders, the day is approaching when woman shall be redeemed from the curse of Eve, and I have often thought that our daughters who are in polygamy will be the first redeemed. Here is the curse: in sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. Woman will be redeemed from that curse, as sure as the coming of tomorrow's sun. No more, after this generation, shall civilized man rule over his mate, but they twain shall be one, and the sisters are looking for that millennial day. These are the wise virgins of the church, and their lamps are trimmed.